Kia ora, hello, welcome to this video. This video is most likely going to be called Space Farm / Ticket / Living Force - the Big Three. And you might think, what the hell? Well, basically, the bit at the end, the Big Three, is about three particular Aotearoa, aka New Zealand musicians, who were in these three bands that I've mentioned. Two of them were in all the band. Two of the groups I mentioned, and one of them was in also two of the three. Now, the reason I'm doing this video is because these are three musicians that, unless you're my age I'm now 68, or perhaps even a bit older, maybe a little bit younger as well, you may or may not possibly never heard of them, right? One of them has passed away. So I'll tell you who they are. The three musicians are Glenn Absalom, also known as Glenny Pig, drummer and percussionist. The other two are Eddie Hansen, who's a guitarist and a bass player. And the final of the three is Harvey Mann, who is a guitarist and occasionally also plays bass. Now, I want to talk about these guys because, as I said before, they're from way long time ago, and one of them since has passed, that younger generations possibly have never heard of. And also I feel that even when they were around, they were sort of quite underground, different and alternative. And I don't think they really got the recognition they truly deserved, in my opinion. So where to start? Let's go back to sort of the beginnings of their early days, late 60s, early 70s. So I'm going to start with guitarist Harvey Mann and drummer Glenn Absalom, aka Glenny Pig, who were in a band back in 1969, 1970, called The Underdogs. Now, some of you watching this possibly have heard of The Underdogs, and there was the original Underdogs band. Neither of these two were in it. But later on, Harvey Mann, the guitarist, he joined the band, and before Glenn did, and he became part of the Underdogs. I think originally they were called the Underdogs Blues Band. I can't remember if they formed in 68 or 69, but somewhere around there, probably 68. And they were one of the first New Zealand groups to start playing blues or blues rock music in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So Harvey Mann joined the original lineup. He wasn't an original member. And then a bit later on, the band had quite a big reshuffle, and a lot of them left. And in the end, it was just Harvey Mann was just left. Basically, they sort of disbanded, and then Harvey Mann decided to keep the name on with the initial concept of it being a kind of a blues rock band. And then when Glenn joined, they just they no longer use the name The Underdog Blues Band, but just calls themselves simply The Underdogs. So I'm going to show you an album that they recorded with this lineup. Also, part of that lineup was bass player Neil Edwards. Now, I've got the original vinyl here. I think this is one of my original vinyls. So here's the cover, and the album's called The Underdogs, Wasting Our Time. If you can see that. So there's the cover there with somebody doesn't show their head or anything else. They're holding one of those old school, what do you call them? Kind of little lockets where you can put photos and things in. Or it could also be, I think it almost looks like a timepiece, like very early watches. You know, that part of it there could be, I haven't really looked at that, but I think that's part of one of those old school watches, you know, before they had wristwatches, or even when wristwatches came in, there was still a lot of people using these older style. And then there's a photo of the band in there. I don't know if I can get it any closer. So it's probably a bit blurry though. That's Harvey Mann, the guitarist, on this side. In the middle is Neil Edwards, and Glenn Absalom, aka Glenny Pig, is on the end, and he's the drummer. So that's the cover. I'll bring it back a bit. And if you turn it over, it also before I do that, in a subtitle under The Underdogs, it's got Pig, because Glenn Absalom's nickname was Glenny Pig. Now I don't know the real truth behind this nickname, but somewhere years ago I heard that he used to walk around, I don't know how true this is, making pig snort sounds like that. I don't know. I don't know if that, I haven't really confirmed that's true. But anyway, they've put this in here, Pigman and Edwards, I guess for people who back then knew the Underdogs, but might have thought it was the original band. So I guess that's partly to distinguish what lineup this is. And if you flip it over, right, you'll get on the back here, there's a few more photos. And if I get that a bit closer, you'll see Harvey Mann there on guitar and Neil Edwards on bass, and there's Glenn showing him on the drums. This album was published, I think it says 1970. Yeah, this guy, Bob Gillette, down the bottom here, he was one of the producers, and he, what does it says? It actually says on the back, he did Glock recorder and voice and production. It was recorded at Mascot Studios in Auckland. Now, this album, you could say, is a blues album, but it's really a rock album as well, and it's going into areas of rock. Some of the tracks are more obvious blues, but it's going into a kind of a rock experimental thing where they're playing some songs that are kind of their own kind of rock sound that's unique to them, if you like. Yes, there's blues influences without a doubt, and we're starting to hear bits of people like Jimi Hendrix, who I know Harvey Mann was very influenced by back then and continued to be. So this is recorded October 1970. That would have been, in fact, the month after Jimi Hendrix had passed away. So this is a pretty interesting album, and I still love it. It's on an old New Zealand label, Pie label. Probably never heard of that, any of you overseas people, or even locals here, because it doesn't exist anymore. I think they made other sure if they made other products. I could be wrong on that. I do have the CD version, which it came out on CD years later. That's it there. And it's interesting because on the back, there's another photo that I hadn't seen before. Maybe it's a bit better than the one in the timepiece, if you like. It's Harvey there, Glenn, and that's Neil Edwards. So that photo there. With this one here, and if you open it up, the disc itself has got the cover of the first album on it rather than, what do you call it? Like in the vinyl where it's just got the Pie label. So it looks like that, right? Comes out like that. And there's the photo. I hadn't realised this before, but those photos are repeated if you take the CD out. So my brother had this album. He was a big fan of theirs, and he was a musician. He was a bass player. So I used to hear this album coming from his bedroom. And that was my kind of first introduction to these two of the three, the big three. By the way, I want to thank a friend of mine who lives in Auckland, who's also a guitarist, a guy called Stephen Parker. He coined the term Big Three. Stephen used to go and watch Eddie, Glenn, and Harvey when they had a band called The Survivors. Now I'm jumping forward a bit here, just a three-piece band where Glenn and Harvey would swap on bass and drums. Stephen actually also took guitar lessons from Eddie Hansen, and I've talked to him a lot about this, and he's told me some interesting stories. Now, way back then was a time when I was no longer living in Auckland, so I never saw that lineup. But when I met and got to know Stephen years later, he told me so many interesting stories, and I hope at one stage to hopefully maybe get Stephen on the channel, and he can talk maybe more about that. So anyway, this is obvious, might be quite a long video. So then, before I go on to the next incarnation of Harvey and Glenn in the band The Underdogs, they then later on changed their name a couple of times, but they became known as a band called Space Farm, and they also did an album. But before I get to that, or maybe I will, no, actually, maybe I will get to that now before I get on to Eddie, the other one of the big three. So in 1972, so this is 2 years later from the Underdogs album, they put out this album called Space Farm, self-titled album. That was the name of the band. It says on the back here, it says they initially changed their name from the Underdogs with a name called the Australasian Rock Squad. I'm not quite sure about the Australasian, but I don't know how that comes into it, because they're all from Australasian. For any of you watching this outside of Australia and New Zealand, is a term for it used to be used as a term for like New Zealand and Australia combined. When I think about it, it's kind of a weird name, but anyway, maybe I've got that wrong. Correct me if I am. Put something down in the comments about that. But finally, the group settled on the name Space Farm. So this album is quite different from the Underdogs. This is going into totally new territory. Well, not in the sense, only there's still elements of the blues here, but this is more what I'd call cosmic acid rock. Was it called acid rock back then, or psychedelic rock? Call it what you like. Cosmic rock. Just a 3-piece, again, but with a different bass player, a guy called Billy Williams. And if I show you the back, you'll see a photo here where they're all looking a bit different. That's Glenn there. So Glenn's sitting down there, and there's Harvey Mann. And at the back is Billy Williams, who was their bass player. I'll just close in on that. Glenn had really long hair then. Harvey had his cut shorter. And so that's what they were like. The original album had a poster in, a big fold-out poster that you could put on your wall. I never got that, unfortunately. And this was on the Zodiac label, which was a New Zealand label. Let me kind of see that. Probably better out of the sleeve here, right? So this album, my brother also bought this album. And I used to hear this being played a hell of a lot. My brother, as I said, was a bass player, and he was heavily influenced by this band and used to go and watch them a lot. And so influenced, in fact, that he formed a band with a couple of people. I don't think they ever ended up doing a public gig, but they rehearsed a lot. And my brother Phil was on bass. A guy called Mark Laurent, who's still around playing music now, and he's someone that I also hope to interview very soon on this channel, on guitar. And a guy called Victor Folks was on drums. So just a 3-piece. And they started developing their own music, but very, very influenced on what Space Farm were doing. And a lot of this music is very, the nearest I could sort of kind of relate it to was the Hendrix album Cry of Love. So if you can think of a lot of the new type of sounds, any of you are familiar with that Hendrix was making with Mitch Mitchell and Billy Cox just before he died, there's stuff kind of similar to that, right? So yeah, that's... Now, the thing was, with these guys, as I said, quite an underground band. They weren't mainstream rock. They were really different. But for some people, even back then, they were almost too far out, including non-musicians and musicians, if you know what I mean. They were way ahead of their time, I think. And it's sad in a way, because I feel if they were still alive today playing music along the lines of that, which obviously it would change by now, but it would be well accepted and people would go, oh, this is amazing, and they'd be a lot more popular, in my opinion. But anyway, it isn't to be. Now, before I go any further, let's get on to the third person of the big three, and that is the amazing Eddie Hansen, mostly known for his guitar playing, but also, in my view, one of the most incredible bass players this country's ever seen. And he, in my opinion, he has the unique ability, and you very rarely see this, of a guy that plays guitar and bass equally as good. I mean, there's a lot of guitarists that do double on bass, and they play it pretty good, but I've never seen one that plays bass just as mind-blowing as they do on the guitar, and it's Eddie. So let's go to a band that Eddie had, and he wasn't a lot of bands before this band, but this is the band that sort of came up around the same time as Space Farm, and they were called Ticket. And here's their debut album. They only did 2 albums. This one's called Awake. This is their debut album, right? Here we go. It says here it was published in 1972. I have a feeling it was recorded perhaps the year before, and they might have finished it in 72, but I'm not certain on that. If we flip it over, you will see a photo of the band. Now, the Underdogs and Space Farm were Auckland-based. Ticket were Christchurch. These guys were from Christchurch originally. They did later on move to Auckland. So this is Eddie here. You know, you can see this is the 70s. Look at their hair. And that's Eddie there. That's the lead singer, Trevor Wallwright. Trevor Tombleson, sorry, got those mixed up. That's Paul Wallwright, bass player, and Ricky Ball. Paul Wallwright and Ricky Ball are still around today, and they later became members of Hello Sailor at different times. So, in fact, Ricky was who are a well-known New Zealand rock band. So this is their debut album. Now, Eddie, like Harvey, was another amazing guitarist, and there was a series done on the radio. It was on RNZ a long time ago, I think it was called Cosmic Guitar Heroes, and a guy called Keith Newman, who's written a lot of stuff on music. He's also written a lot of stuff on Maori culture, or Maori history, I should say, probably, a bit of both. What did I just say? This is what happens. God, I've lost my link here. This is what happens. Anyway, they were quite a band. I didn't get to see these guys live, this original lineup, till I think it was 1972. I would have been 16, right? I went to an outdoor concert at an unusual venue. It was Carlisle Park, which is mostly used for, or was used back then, for rugby league matches, club matches, international games. But for some reason, out of the blue, they used the park for an outdoor concert, and the headline act was a band from Australia who were quite well known in Australia and here, called Daddy Cool. You may have heard of them. They had a big hit with a song called Eagle Rock. So they were the headliners on this concert, and Ticket were the support act, who then was still based in Christchurch. But they came up for this, and that was my first time. I was at that concert at the tender age of 16. Saw them then, totally blown away, never seen anything like it, other than I'd also, when I was, let me think about this, would have been 1971, so maybe the year before, I saw the band Space Farm. So I would have been, hang on, let me get this right. I would have been 15. I saw Space Farm in what they didn't really call them music venues, they call them nightclubs, in a very underground nightclub, and it was literally underground, like way down underneath. You'd go down all these steps, it's like in a basement of basements, called Tabla. Yeah, after the Tabla, but actually, in actual fact, there was a guy called Johnny Tabla who owned the place. That was his name. So it was named after him. And you'd go down these stairs, and just the context of then, nightclubs back then didn't have alcohol licenses, which meant way back then, the drinking age, I think, was 20 or 21. It's now 18. Anyone could go. You didn't have to be 16 or 18 or any age to go into this club. A little kid could go in because no alcohol was served. There was no restriction. So me and a friend, we used to go into town, as 15-year-old boys. And we both loved music, and we went down there, and I'd heard about this band from my brother, and we went down and checked them out. And oh my God, Space Farm! I've never seen anything like it. It was almost, I don't know how to try and think back to how much of an impact they had on me, but back then I was, I suppose, a little bit more naive. I hadn't really grown up and left home yet, and I've been out in the world. But I loved music, and I was already starting to buy records with my paper round money and stuff like that. And I'd bought these albums as well. My brother had them, but I bought my own copies. And remember the photo I showed you of Space Farm? Where is it? So at the time when I got to see them, they all three of them, had shaved their hair off. Now think about this. No one thinks anything, right, of people shaving their hair. People shave it for a look. Men and women, or shave their hair, but for a look. But also a lot of men shave it when they're going boarding, and they usually go, oh, bugger it, might as well shave it all off. And in a way, it seems to look more appealing when you just shave it all off. And also, no one knows, right? Did they shave it off for the look, or have they really gone bald? So there's all that comes into it. But back then, and no sports people, no one, it was unheard of. In the Western world, if you saw someone, Buddhist monks or whatever, or other monks might have done it, so the shaven head, it was just so weird. And here they were, these three guys with their hair all shaven. And not only that, at the time when I went to watch them, or one of the times, they were wearing these matching tops, like I can't really describe them, but they were sort of, they were a bright reddy or orange colour. And the drummer, Glenn, he had this big, huge drum kit, double bass drums. That's another thing. Glenn possibly, I don't know, may have been the first, or definitely one of the first drummers in this country to ever have a double bass drum kit. And somewhere in here, I'll have to quickly whip onto my other phone, my old phone, and show you a picture of his, just bear with me, of his original double bass drum kit when he was still with the Underdogs. Let's see. Just talk amongst yourselves while I find this. My phone, I just had to look for it before. My other phone, this is my old phone. Where is it? Oh, here we go. So, you can see this. Here's Glenn, still with his long hair, pre-space. But take a look at that. That could be either 1969 or 1970. So think about that. Look at that. Incredible, right? And unlike some drummers who years later it became a bit of a trend, right, to get a double bass, especially with quite a few heavy metal drummers. Unlike some drummers who had double bass drums, which was often more for a look, and you wouldn't, and a lot of them, you'd when you'd hear them play, they weren't really playing different things on each bass drum, whereas Glenn would be playing often different beats on each bass drum, as well as doing all these things, different things with his hands. It was amazing. It was incredible. Ahead of his time. Now, also bear in mind, back in those days, no music schools that I'm aware of. Maybe there were music schools for classical training. Pretty sure there were no jazz schools back then, late 60s. I don't know when. I don't think they started to the late 70s or early 80s in Wellington, when I moved to Wellington later, where I now still live. But I hadn't heard of any in Auckland. I mean, they could well have. But I'm pretty sure there was no music schools. So most people were self-taught, or they may have taken, one-on-one private tuition. But even that, there wasn't a lot of people that could teach you, well, either jazz, not that these guys played jazz, but or contemporary, if you like, kind of stuff, aside from basic rudiments and stuff that drummers learn. These guys just watched, listened. I know that Glenn once told me, because I got to know Glenn later on, and I was a good friend of his brother Grant's, or am a good friend of his brother Grant's, who's also a drummer. And Glenn told me at one stage that a guy called Trixie Willoughby, who was a drummer in a band that Harvey Mann played in way back in the 60s, that he got some lessons by him, and he was also inspired by him. He also told me later on that he was inspired by, two of his main inspirations were Mitch Mitchell from the Jimi Hendrix Experience and Mike Shreve from Santana. And if you were lucky enough to ever hear or see Glenn play, you can hear elements of both those drummers in his playing, but he made their influences into his own unique style. Quite amazing. Anyway, we need to get back to poor old Eddie. Let's not leave Eddie out of this. So I'm now going to jump ahead. Well, not jump ahead, but I'm going to still be 1972, the same year that Space Farm was released. And in actual fact, the original Ticket album, although I'm pretty sure it was recorded mostly in 71, because their second album, they only did 2, was this one. Here's the vinyl, my original vinyl. Let Sleeping Dogs Lie, right? And if you turn it over, it's the back, right? This incidentally was recorded in Australia. In fact, it says on the back here, was recorded at TCS Melbourne, Australia between May 1 and the 20th, 1972. So that indicates, because their first album was released in 72, but they must have, well, May's pretty early on in the piece, well, before you're even halfway through the year. I would say most of the first one was recorded in 71, but I'd have to speak to Eddie about that, and maybe I will. But if you open it out, you get an even better idea. There's Eddie there. There's Eddie there. Some used to say he had a moustache a bit like Frank Zappa. There's Paul Wallwright, the bass player, Ricky Ball, the drummer, and Trevor Tombleson, way over this end, the lead singer. So that was their second album recorded in Australia. And they did go to Australia, and they played in Australia quite a bit for a while there. So I also have to mention a significant thing that happened. Now, some of you who know a bit about sort of these 60s, 70s guitarists who were in their heyday from other parts of the world, namely Eric Clapton. When Eric Clapton was in Cream, he became, I don't know if this was before or after Hendrix had gone to England, but sometime maybe before then or round about that time, there was a famous graffiti in London that said, "Clapton is God." Well, we had our own version right here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And someone also around that time did the graffiti, "Man is God," M-A-N-N, Harvey Mann's last name. So this is the type of thing that was happening in underground circles, and people who knew and had checked him out were going, this guy is unbelievable. And I would say the same for Eddie Hansen. But, I mean, I lived in Auckland then. I don't know if that ever happened in Christchurch, but not that I've heard of. But anyway, this is the kind of, I don't know whether they call it a counterculture thing that was happening back then. Yeah, because even graffiti back then in this country, you didn't see a lot of it. It wasn't like it became years and years and years later, became, quite commonplace. People in the know, people who love music, people who like cosmic music, people who like psychedelic music, people who like rock, people who like progressive rock that was going in places that had never gone before. They knew about these musicians, right? And they were highly respected by these people, or they were, dare I say, feared, or I don't know if that's a good word to say, or thought of as being too far out, and some people just couldn't comprehend what they were doing. They were ahead of their time. So anyway, where am I going to go now? I'm going to go, so I need to talk about how the big three, Eddie, Glenn and Harvey, ended up coming together. So I don't know all the ins and outs of the story, but Ticket did move. They'd heard about, both bands had heard about each other, because Ticket and Space Farm were, on the scene around the same time. And there were, I believe, concerts, definitely in Auckland. There may have been some in Christchurch as well, where they were on the same bill. And so they got to know each other. And Eddie was very, I know Eddie was very influenced and loved Harvey's playing. I guess Harvey liked his playing. I haven't heard a lot about that, but I do know that they both had great respect for each other. And they ended up jamming, becoming close friends. Now, later on, as I said to you, Space Farm shaved their heads. Now, this is a thing I'm not sure about, but my understanding is they shaved their heads initially just as a look for the band, and especially with a name like Space Farm, they played like they were from another planet. So why not? I don't know. But down the track, Glenn and Harvey became involved and eventually converted to the Hare Krishna movement. Now, we all know that, well, we may all not know, but anyone who's you must have seen Hare Krishnas chanting wherever you live, in your street. They chant in the cities. You know, for those of you who don't know, the Hare Krishna movement was originally started by a guy called, I think it says his name, Swami Prabhupada, if I'm saying that right, who was from India. And he went to the States and created the Hare Krishna movement. You know, I suppose it grew partly out of aspects of Hinduism, which, if anyone who knows about Hindu scriptures will find that Krishna is one of the deities and gods, and Hindu religion. There's many, right? But with the Hare Krishna movement, and I think it talks, I don't know if it talks about this in the Hindu scriptures, I'm not an expert, but Krishna, they called the supreme personality of Godhead, right? So this guy, Swami Prabhupada, went to the States. This was around, putting this in context, this was around about the time that, you know, the whole 60s, 70s revolution of, I suppose, sex, drugs and rock and roll, but everything, you know, spirituality, people were taking lots of LSD and things like that, and then people were getting interested in Eastern religions a lot. And what happened in the States, that movement grew and grew and grew, and then it started spreading around the world. It came to Hawaii, and eventually it came down here to this country. And somehow Harvey and Glenn were exposed to it, became interested in it, and eventually they do what you do when you become a Hare Krishna. You shave your head, but you usually have unlike when I initially saw them, they had no hair at all. They usually have a little tuft of hair at the back, if you've looked closely. The most Hare Krishnas, devotees. And they gave up playing in bands, moved into the Hare Krishna temple. You know? Now, so they moved into the Hare Krishna temple, and I don't know what year that was. Or it have been, might have been, I don't know, I'm just guessing here. Would have been probably around 72, 73-ish. And so then they weren't playing rock music anymore. They were just playing, they were still playing guitar, and Glenn was playing percussion, one of those Indian drums, a mridanga that Hare Krishnas use. My brother actually became a Hare Krishna as well. And actually, I never became one, but I ended up going along and I got involved. I started doing a bit of chanting. I never joined the temple or anything. I was shaved my head or anything like that. But I got interested in it for about 6 months and was quite into it. Used to go to all their gatherings. So when eventually, somewhere down the line, I don't know if Glenn and Harvey moved out of the temple at one stage. They ended up, and by the way, the other thing that I need to say is that, no, this might have been after they just moved out. I don't know the details of this, to be honest. They did a recording. It's never been released publicly. I think it was called, oh God, it's not Mahavishnu, but it's something like that, Maha Mantra or... So they recorded this album with Harvey playing electric guitar and bass and Glenn playing drums. And a lot of it's kind of like Krishna chants, but there are some songs that are just words that Harvey wrote. but they're all, spiritually Krishna inspired. But it does have kind of rock, cosmic rock kind of feel to quite a bit of it, some quite interesting stuff in there. I eventually, through friends of theirs, and got hold of a copy. I still have it somewhere, but it's never been released publicly or commercially. So they did this, and then when they left the Hare Krishna temple, I don't know if they left at the same time, or anyway, when Glenn left, he started playing in a few bands, and then he hooked up with Eddie, who him and Harvey had become quite close friends with. And somewhere along the way there, Eddie also then became a Hare Krishna, but unlike, I don't think he ever, as far as I know, never shaved his head or never moved into a temple. But he followed it like someone who's into it full on. And what happened then was a very interesting thing. So the band Ticket, right? The old original Ticket, which Eddie was in with those other guys, that band broke up, and then Eddie and the lead singer Trevor decided when Glenn came onto the scene, they reformed the band as a kind of Ticket Mark II, if you like, which was a very interesting band. And that was my my real exposure on a constant basis. By this time I was 17, 1973. They had a residency at a nightclub in Auckland called Levi's Saloon, right? Now, you might think, oh, were they playing all Christian music? Well, no, not really. Although both Harvey Mann had written some songs, and I think, not sure if Eddie wrote some, but they played some numbers that had references to Krishna in them. There was one called Paradise. There was one called Chariot of Love. And so they would play this club every Friday, Saturday night. Once I saw them, I was hooked. And I had to go, and I would go all the time. I would go every Friday and Saturday. I was still living at home then for a while, and then I left home and got a flat with my brother. I would go and watch them. I wouldn't miss them. I'd pretty much be there all the time, every night for as long as they had a residency there. I can't remember. It wasn't more than a year, but it was a pretty while. They may have even done the odd Thursday night as well. I can't remember if they also played Thursday sometimes. And they would play a mixture of these newish spiritual songs, but done in a kind of cosmic psychedelic rock sense, with quite a few Hendrix covers, old Ticket songs, and old Space Farm songs. So it was a mashup of all that, right? Quite a few Hendrix covers. But it was incredible. They were incredible. I was just, I would, this might be going, for me, I don't know, I could probably say this, that particular lineup, for me, because they had such an impact on me. You know, I think when you're 17 and you've been getting into music for a while, and you've left home and you're going out and you're checking out bands, that's the time when live music or music you're listening to has a real big impact on you, you know. because you're starting to discover this amazing stuff. And that band probably, I dare say, even to this day, might be my favourite band I've ever seen from this country, and possibly ever. It might sound outrageous, and like most people would have never have seen that lineup because they weren't together that long, right? But even though I would see them every weekend, twice, maybe sometimes 3 times a week, I never, ever got bored, and every time they would blow my mind. That's how good they were. It was like I was seeing them for the first time, and I'd never seen anything like it. They were that incredible. And yet, people don't know about them. That's why I'm doing this video. And I may do a follow-up and go into more detail. I want to try, because you might think, oh, well, there's this old guy talking about some old hat stuff, I'm not a musician, right? What does he know? Where's all the info about them? How come every other musician's not talking about them? Well, if you get into the music scene and you know a lot of older musicians who knew them, and the ones who really got to find out what they were all about, they'd soon tell you. They'd back me up with this. They would, honestly. And what I hope to do at some stage, if I can, is bring in some of these people like Stephen Parker, who took lessons off Eddie, and other people that saw them, were associated with them, or just saw them as fans or musicians who truly admired or inspired by them, and get them to talk about what they thought about these guys. And so it's just not me, right? It's just not me being obsessed or something by this stuff from way back. I'm not being an old fart that's living back in that era. I mean, at the end of the day, any of you who are true music lovers will know that great, incredible music never ages when it's that good. And I think the same can be said for them. I mean, there might be tracks on, where is it? Say the Underdogs album. But that was with Neil Edwards. Where I might go, oh yeah, don't know about this one. But there are still a couple of tracks, there's quite a few tracks there that I still think stand up and are amazing for this day. But when it comes to this lineup, and by the way, I forgot to add, the ticket that I'm going on about, the Mark II version, Billy Williams, the bass player, he was the bass player in that lineup. So what you had, but I'll finish what I'm saying here. This never ages for me. I can put this on anytime. Never get sick of it. It's incredible. So that means that the Mark II ticket were basically, right? They were basically one half of Space Farm, Glenn and Harvey, one half or 2/3, if you like, there's only 3 of them, hang on, Jesus, I'm losing it, Noel, wrong album cover, of these guys, Eddie and Trevor, with Eddie and Trevor, with Glenn and Billy. Harvey wasn't part of this, But I'll get to that later when we get to the big three, right? It's all leading up to the big three, mate. So, where are we up to? We've got Space Farm, we've got Ticket. And I've told you about their, becoming Hare Krishnas. So after Ticket, that lineup and that incarnation of Ticket eventually fell apart, and I think Trevor went overseas. I think he went to Australia or England or somewhere. And Billy moved, I don't know how far later. No, Billy was still around here for a while, but he later moved to Australia and still is in Australia. Incredible bass player as well. And Trevor, incredible singer. I love the original Ticket as well, don't get me wrong. But I think there was a chemistry there I can't explain. But when we come to the big three, which is going to be the tail end, already this video's got up to an hour. You might be going, oh, God, come on. That's cool. You can hang around if you want. You don't have to. Switch over, switch off. That's when you get to a very, very, in my view, a very special magic chemistry that is just on another planet. Can't describe it. Anyway, so let's get back to, where are we? 1973. Ticket Mark II is broken up. And then we have Harvey Mann appears back on the scene. He's also out of the temple by this time. So he hooks back up with his old buddy Glenn, true mates. Wherever Glenn goes, Harvey goes, pretty much. There's an odd occasion where he didn't in Ticket. But Glenn also continued to have double bass drums. He knew from the Underdogs days to later on. Now, what happened here was Levi's Saloon changed ownership. Levi's Saloon, it used to be down the bottom of town by the old bus terminal. I forget the name of the street, but very close to the downtown bus terminal, which is still there now. We changed its name and had a new owner to Free Flight. And a lot of the clientele at Levi's Saloon originally too, I should say, the original Ticket lineup played there, right? Before Mark II happened. And then obviously they broke up, and then when the Mark II played, they continued at that same venue. But it became Free Flight. In 1974, a year later, I'm pretty sure it was a new owner. It took the same location. It was called Free Flight. And the band for that venue was called Chaitanya. Now, Chaitanya, again, getting back to these Hindu gods, if you like. I think Lord Chaitanya, he's another, I don't know if he's a god or a lord or somebody back in Hindu scripture, or I don't know where it differentiates from the Hindu scriptures to the Krishna kind of literature, like from the Bhagavad Gita. But he was some dude, highly thought of, respected from those days, holy man, holy person. This band was the first incarnation of what Stephen Parker coined. I don't know if Stephen saw this lineup. He saw a later lineup called The Survivors, called of the Big Three. Yeah, it's called Chaitanya. Now, Free Flight, the latter part of when Levi's Saloon originally opened up with the old ticket, it was, probably still a standard nightclub thing with a rock band. But when Ticketmark 2 played there, it started morphing into more of a, and I don't like to give it a, stereotype, but it became more of a hippie vibe there, right? And that continued into the name Free Flight, but it was more of a hippie, health food, wholesome kind of thing. That kind of went, of course, with what they had become, with being into the Christian movement and having this new band, Chaitanya. So the lineup here was Harvey on guitar, sometimes bass, Eddie on bass mostly, but sometimes guitar, and Glenn on drums. Now, they did some cover songs, like they played a bit of stuff off Santana's Caravanserai, which is interesting. I know they did the track, I'll Never Forget, All the Love of the Universe. For those of you who know the album and know the vinyl especially, it's the last track on side 1. I mean, that, the Santana version it's a big band, lots of percussionists, as you know, Santana always have. Well, when those guys played it, with Harvey on guitar, Eddie on bass, Eddie on drums, and miscellaneous percussion, it might have well as been 10-piece band. I don't know how they did it. But they could conjure up so many rhythms between the three of them and things going on. It created the illusion that you were listening to a huge band. It was unbelievable. Never seen anything like it. That was my first time to see Eddie play bass. I was totally blown away. Couldn't believe it. Never heard anyone play bass like that before in my life. And I haven't till this day, to be honest. He had a style of his own. So they would play stuff by Santana. I don't know if they did any Hendrix stuff. I'm trying to remember. And then they would play some of the ones. For some reason, it's hard to me to remember the other stuff they played. But it all had that vibe to it. They're playing some of their own music, more new songs that Harvey wrote. And they may have thrown in some Hendrix numbers here or there. They may have done some, I think they did some old Space Farm songs like Flying, which Ticketmark 2 also used to cover. Incredible band. Now I'm going to reach for my old phone again and show you. I've got a couple of photos here. Just to find the right page again of Glenn on his drum kit. I think my brother took this photo. Now, I eventually sent it to Glenn. Unfortunately, Glenn's passed away. It's really sad. A few years back. Find this photo of Glenn, who was then playing a brand new Vibes, for you drum people, Vibes drum kit, which back then was unheard. No one had heard of it. I don't even know if Vibes is still around now. It's an incredible kit at the time. Check this out. You're not seeing the whole kit here, but here's Glenn with a new look. His hair's growing back a bit. He's got it spawning a beard. Trying to get that on the right angle so you can see it. If you can see that. That photo was taken by my brother at Free Flight in 1974. That's Glenn on his Vibes kit. And you'll see there, you'll see the gong in the background behind him. He had a gong. Yeah, amazing. So, in fact, Glenn says on here, after I sent him the photo, me and my Vibes kid at a club called Free Flight. He's got possibly about 75, 76, but I know in actual fact it was 74 when my brother took that photo. Anyway, I'm going to now find... There are some other photos. I haven't got them handy, but I'm going to have to do a part 2 of this, or when I extend interviewing other people that knew about them. I'm going to just get up for a sec, and I got the sun beaming through here. It's just getting a bit hot here, and pull the curtains slightly over. It might get a bit darker. So just, what do they say? Talk amongst yourselves for a minute. So I'm just pulling this curtain over. I'm still here. I haven't rushed off. Now, hope that's not too dark. How's that? Right. So now I need to find the photo of Eddie, which is, again, I've got to find it on here somewhere. Just bear with me. Bear with me, whānau. Let's have a look here. Photo of Eddie Henson. Where are we? It's getting close. Here we go. Here's Eddie Henson playing bass in 1974 at Free Flight. His hair was also a bit shorter then, and it wasn't as long head ticket days. So yeah. You know, it's Andy on a Fender there. Is it a Fender? Or is it a Music Man? I'm not sure. Music Man's around then. They probably were. Okay. You can see the beads and stuff, you know, and in the... Are they Hare Krishna beads? Probably, possibly. So yeah. Also taken at Free Flight. I've got another photo somewhere of Harvey on guitar, but it's not handy. I'll have to dig it up. And there may be one other photo too. I'm not sure, but I'll try and dig that up for another video, okay? So that was Chaitanya. Now, that I don't remember that particular lineup lasting too long. 74, 75. But anyway, that they broke up. That the band Chaitanya wasn't around for too long. And then we basically didn't hear from any, well, Harvey and Glenn. Eddie, I think, went to Australia. Did he go to Australia? I'm not sure, but he did play in some other bands. And I know that Glenn, actually at one stage, he joined some covers band in Auckland as a drummer. I never saw them, but I heard from a few musos that he joined this middle of the road covers band, and they reckon when he joined the band, within about 3 weeks, the band were like on another level and become an incredible band simply by having him in the band. And that's how good he is, and that's the influence he can have, how one guy and an incredible drummer like that can do that. So it doesn't surprise me. You know, the sad thing about these guys that really annoys me a lot, there's no film footage of them playing in their heyday of Space Farm. There's some of Ticket, the early Ticket, or there's Ticket Mark II, there's none of that. Or there's one of Living, oh no, I nearly spoiled what's coming. No. But anyway, there's hardly any footage, if any, and it's minimal. More on that later, okay? There was a little bit of Space Farm playing in the rotunda in Auckland Museum Domain. It was used on some TV program years ago, but I think that's been erased, that footage, as far as I know. I've tried to hunt some of these. And also, Ticket Mark II were on a TV show. Oh, God, the name of it. In 1973. It was called Free Ride, right? Now, I've tried through the archives here, the film archives and TV archives and places, to try and hunt down footage of it. And I've got a few people that I know that work in those places, but I've had no joy. And I've also found that a lot of the old footage from back then was taped over, and, some of it was kept, which is really frustrating because, somehow there's other groups from around that time, not necessarily that program, but other TV things of other artists from Aotearoa, New Zealand, who you can still find footage. It's really sad because, and I must add that even with the recorded stuff, right, in my view, none of it's anywhere as amazing as these bands were live. It doesn't really represent what they did, which is a real shame. There was a bootleg recording made of Space Farm, and they in the end okayed the release of it. And I think if you hunt online, you can get copies of Space Farm live, but the recording's terrible. I mean, it's so bad. It was done on a 2-track old mini reel-to-reel tape thing or something. It's just, the drums sound like tin cans. The recording's shocking. You can hardly, it doesn't do it justice. It's, I'd rather not even listen to it, It doesn't represent, if you were there hearing them do it live, So anyway, let's jump forward. We're going to jump forward to around 1974, more 1975. So a band came about by the name of Living Force. Okay, Living Force. Now, Living Force were a spiritual rock band. And the original lineup had both Harvey Mann on guitar, Glenn Absalom on drums. At this stage, there was no Eddie Hansen, but he did come in a little bit later. They had a guy called Gary Clark, who's still around playing, on bass, and a guy called Murray Partridge on guitar and slide guitar. Now, I don't know how it kind of went, but I'm pretty sure Murray left and was replaced by Eddie, or Murray was still in it and Eddie joined. No, I think Murray left and was replaced by Eddie. Can't quite remember. And this was when I first saw Living Force, which was in 1975, and I saw them playing live at, again, another new nightclub. I think it was in a street called Airedale Street in Auckland City, called Crofts. So this was Living Force. Now, Living Force was a very interesting band because although they were a Krishna-based spiritual band, the music was still very rocky. It it still had lots of elements of Hendrix in there. It had lots of it had lots of kind of Santana type sounds to it, but it was all their own music and all original. And so this band went on for a while, and the lineup sort of changed a bit as time went on. Gary Clark left, and eventually they had another bass player who also played guitar, a Pacific Island guy called Matt Matipi, I think is his name, is that how you say it. I'm not sure which island Matt's from, whether he's Tongan or Samoan. I'll get back to you on that. Matt also did quite a bit of singing. He's a really good vocalist. So down the track, somewhere later on, I've kind of I've jumped ahead a little bit here because now let me think about this. No, I haven't. I'm losing it here. So they eventually recorded an album, and it was released. It was published, and although I no longer have my original vinyl, I don't know what happened to it. I do have, this is way back in the days before, was it in the days before, was in the days when CDs had just come out? I'm trying to remember when you could buy blank CDs and you could burn them. I can't remember when that was, but a friend of mine, you couldn't get Living Force on CD, but a friend of mine had one of these, and back then there weren't many of these. This was the very, very early days of having CD burners, as they call them. A friend of mine managed to copy a vinyl of Living Force's vinyl album to a CD, right? And I'll just try and find it. Hang on. It's here somewhere. Where have I put the darn thing? Oh, God. Seem to have misplaced it. It's crazy. Can't find it. I'm a bit annoyed. Bugger. It's got to be here somewhere. Come on. Oh dear. Don't get it. Can't believe I can't find it. I had all of these things lined up, and I've picked it up and misplaced it, put it down somewhere. So amongst my vinyls here. Where the hell has it gone? I put it down somewhere else and it's full. Oh, look at that. So this is a burnt copy, and it's the only thing that it's got is a photo taken of the original vinyl cover placed in here, and that was the original cover, Living Force. And on the back of the original album, my friend also, on a piece of cardboard, the back of the cover looked like that, but it wasn't in black and white. He's just in a black and white copy of it. That was the cover. And if you look here, the only person that's missing from this photo is Eddie Hansen. Now, I can't remember why Eddie wasn't here for the photo, but let's talk about that another time when I can find one. So on the back, here's Harvey Mann. There's Glenn Absalom. And there's Matt Matipi. I talked about, try and get that a bit closer. Not a very good photo because it's a black and white version of a colour photo. The original photo is quite good. This guy here is a guy called Johnny Pepper, or John Pepper, who played keyboards. And this guy here is a guy called Mike Fisher, who did percussion. Mike also at another lineup of this band at a time when Glenn left. Glenn was having Glenn had some problems with his hearing at one stage, and he had to leave the band, and I don't know if it was at this time. So Mike Fisher took over on drums, and Harvey wasn't in that lineup as well. So it was just Matt, Eddie, John Pepper, and Mike Fisher on drums. So on this are all original songs. Let's see. Quite a few are written by Harvey Mann, about 3. There's a couple are written by Eddie Hansen. Matt Matipi writes at least 1. And there's an instrumental, which is really good, called Sweet Inspiration. Just instrumental. It's incredible. This is incredible. Some of the Plain Honey. I mean, there's some tracks on here that are sort of ballady, almost like Krishna chanting type things, like Hurry Bull and Sail This Boat, Hello Friends. I mean, they're nice, sweet, and there's some lovely melodic guitar playing. But the other tracks are more upbeat, pretty full on, more intense, and some dual guitar playing, lead guitar breaks. Incredible. But still an incredible album. 1977 this came out. Okay. So I used to go and watch this band in their later incarnation, when it was just Matt had left the band. So what the lineup, I used to go into this club and down an arcade, and I've forgotten the name of the arcade. It wasn't Queen's Arcade. Some of you may remember, it's still there, Queen's Arcade. Well, just along from that was another arcade, and right down the other end of it, a little narrow arcade that was just straight, was a nightclub, which I can't remember the name of it, but I know that it was run by an Afro-American guy who was a musician, and I get confused about this because it's either a guy that used to play bass for the Commodores, or it's another Afro-American guy that was a singer. I get this confused. But anyway, he owned the club, and lots of different bands played there. On a Sunday afternoon, Living Force started playing there, right? They did this for quite a while, almost, I think it seemed like every Sunday or every second Sunday. And I would go down. A lot of people didn't know about these gigs, and maybe people that did thought, oh, God, it's a bloody Hare Krishna band, I don't want to listen to that stuff, not really knowing what it was like. Because what would happen is, in this lineup, it's Harvey on guitar, Eddie on bass, but then Eddie they'd switch, especially when Eddie would do his songs, he'd switch to guitar and Harvey would play bass. Johnny Pepper on keyboards, Glenn on drums, Mike Fisher on keyboards, and that was it. And I also have some photos from that. I don't know if I can